Okay, I do apologize, and we're gonna call this meeting of the Tainter Lake Rehabilitation District meeting to order. Better late than never. At least that's what I'm gonna say today on January 18th, 2024. Looks like we have we're missing two board members who were excused from the meeting. We'll move on to the approval of the agenda and the meeting minutes from our last meeting. Would somebody like to make a motion?
Make a motion, we approve the minutes of the last meeting.
Pete makes a motion. Chuck is a second. Any discussion? If not, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And that passes. Recognition of visitors and visitor comments. Is there anybody who is in attendance that would like to speak? Feel free to come up and approach the podium. If not, then we will move on and continue with our meeting. Are we gonna have, is Scott's on our agenda later, right?
No, Scott's up next.
Oh, he's gonna be up next.
Yep.
Okay. So yes, well, yeah, it is on the agenda next. So no public comment. So were there any written comment from anybody?
No.
Okay. So with that, we'll move on to our next item on the agenda. I'm gonna pull up you sent a PowerPoint. Let me get that pulled up first, but if you want to come up and start your presentation, while I look for that.
I'll give the mic a test. Can you hear me okay?
You
Good.
can. And I'll have to present, I'll just give me a sign when you need me to move to the slide to the.
Okay.
next one. So,
Okay, Jim.
Scott, do you want to introduce yourself?
yes.
All right, I'm Dr. Scott McGovern. I am a professor at Stout, UW Stout. I teach in a variety of subjects in environmental science, and it's been an interest area of mine that I'm going to tell you about. I'm actually going to tell you about 3 different methods that can clean up the green that you're used to seeing in Tainter Lake during the summer. So, Jim, if I could have that up in full screen, the first slide. Or is that the way we have to do it?
You can hit
slideshow on the
So you
top.
can hit slideshow and that'll put it up on the full screen.
Yeah, when I do that, it doesn't share it. See, I've got it here, a full screen.
Oh, it doesn't share it when you do
Yeah.
that? Okay, then we'll just work with it on how we have to. Okay. So we're gonna call this lake balancing. A lot of people don't like some of the other names that there are. Biomanipulation is another name. Trophic cascade, they sometimes call this top-down method of cleaning a lake. And as you know, we have green, and it's often mistakenly called algae. It is not an algae. We have a photosynthetic bacteria, cyanobacteria. That's what we have in Lake Tainter. And we have about 5 or 6 different species of cyanobacteria. And this lake balancing, well, obviously that we have the green, we have an imbalance in Lake Tainter. That is obvious. We can see it in the summer when it's growing green. And we do attribute it to phosphate and nitrate. We have plenty of nutrient coming into the lake. We have the sun, which is definitely needed for a photosynthetic organism. And when the temperatures get a certain, maybe water temperature in the 60s, we start to see colonies of this cyanobacteria. We can go to the next slide, Jim. Okay, so we have this lake balancing, and as you see on the left, there are a few species of fish. This is typical of a green lake, few species of fish, and it is green, and there isn't much happening in the water. When we look at the right, we see plants, clearer water. They're showing a few more species, and this is lake balancing. Now, Joseph Shapiro in 1975 coined the term biomanipulation. It existed before that. It is a ecological principle. Stephen Carpenter, probably the best limnologist, lake scientist that Wisconsin ever had, coined the term trophic cascade for the lakes and used trophic cascade. He wrote an excellent book, and I have it on the shelf of my library at home. This has been used, the point being here, it's been used for about 60 years. So balancing the lake, whether you call it biomanipulation, trophic cascade, it's been used a lot. And there have been plenty of good successes. So if we can go to the next slide. Okay, here is the concept. A lot of people wonder, well, what do fish have to do with cleaning up the green? Well, if you look to the far right, you see the cyanobacteria and other organisms that do photosynthesis, and we do have algae and diatoms. We have a variety, but we're dominated by the cyanobacteria. Well, they're trying to show a water flea there, and the very next one to the left of that circle. The water flea is a crustacean that eats cyanobacteria. And the idea with this lake balancing is to promote organisms like that that eat the cyanobacteria. But the problem we have, if you keep an eye open in the spring, you're going to see a lot of hatchlings. A lot of different hatchlings. We'll have a cloud at the shore sometimes of small minnow-like hatchlings of fish, and they make short work of these crustaceans that eat the cyanobacteria. They end them very quickly. And when you have those animals depleted, the green can really, really multiply and take over. Well, the idea, they're showing to the far left a larger fish eating the smaller one. That's what you want. To make this lake balancing, you want to reduce the predation on the zooplankton or the crustaceans. I'll call them both during this presentation. And you do that by promoting predator fish like muskie, northern, walleye, largemouth bass, smallmouth bass. All of these can contribute by eating these small fish. And what can compound the problem is that a lake not only has small fish, but they have a lot of rough fish. Rough fish like the common carp, the sucker, the white sucker we have in Lake Tainter. We also have shorthead red horse, silver red horse in Lake Tainter. We do have some common carp and other rough fish like gizzard shad and mooneye. We may have a few of those as well. But it would be a good idea to do some type of fish population study to just see what the population is and how many you can remove. So if you can reduce, you're not going to end all of the small fish, of course, but if you can reduce the predation on crustaceans, you will reduce the green. The whole idea behind this. Next slide, please, Jim. Okay, this is just showing you. On the top, you see a lot of small, what they're calling zooplankton feeding fish. and they reduced the crustaceans or the zooplankton considerably. And you end up with a lot of the green, okay? On the bottom, a predator fish reduced the zooplankton feeding fish. And you end up with a lot of zooplankton or crustaceans. And they reduced the green, the cyanobacteria. And that's the idea of this lake balancing. You end up with an equilibrium where you end up with clear water. Okay. Next slide, please, Jim. Okay, so the zooplankton feed on the cyanobacteria. And what type of organisms do we want to promote? Well, we can increase plants, and that will give the zooplankton or the crustaceans a place to hide. There are synthetic refuges, if you wish to call them, just areas like you could take a Christmas tree and put a fine screen across the Christmas tree, and the zooplankton can get away from the fish and hide in that area, and they can come out and clean our green. But here are the animals that are important. If you click on one here, you'll see the Daphnia. If you could click on that, Jim, please. There's a Daphnia. Click again, Jim. That's a copepod, another type of crustacean. And then click and that is called a seed shrimp, ostracod. It will eat filaments of cyanobacteria. And then, of course, I'm going to say mussels or clams, and that would be the indigenous. You want the indigenous, you don't want invasive species in your lake, but the indigenous do clean up and filter the water quite nicely. So all of these animals that you're looking at eat the green. They eat the cyanobacteria. They bring the water cleaner. There are ways, as I just said, to increase plants. Some projects have actually raised Daphnia and copepods and released them in areas because they wanted more of these animals. And the surveys that they did, you just use the microscope and do a survey and count how many zooplankton or crustaceans you have per liter or cubic meter of water. And these animals, an increased amount of them, can really very shortly clean up the water. And if we move to the next slide, please. Now, Tainter Lake does have a history where they did remove rough fish. We haven't really done this since 1986, but as I understand it, there used to be a commercial fisherman that would come into Tainter, and you'll see common carp are out there, dogfish. You'll see the sucker, probably red horse and white sucker, I'm assuming. And yeah, we removed at one time, there was 110,000 pounds removed of the common carp. So there have been in the past sizable amounts, but the last entry is 1986, and this is the only data I have. You'll see a map of various locations that have been seine netted for these rough fish, and the removal of the rough fish have been good for the lake, useful for the lake. And I would propose that once you had an idea of the rough fish that you have in Lake Tainter, that you can do a variety of things. Yes, you could get a commercial fisherman to seine net. I suppose you could maybe charge and have a fishing contest that would remove these and maybe offer some type of prize for the largest catch and end up having a lot of people gather and remove these. I think there would be a variety of things that you could do. Possibly yourself remove a large number of them, depending on your budget and your time and volunteers that you have. There probably be a number of things that you could do. Next slide, please, Jim. Okay, a lot of people have worried or have been concerned, okay, won't our Red Cedar River and Hay River just absolutely repopulate our lake with rough fish after we spent money to remove them. That's no good. Well, it's existed, this lake balancing, for about 60 years. And you could literally go shopping for a variety of different river barriers. This is a barrier that I think is pretty good. It's a bubble barrier. So what you have is a compressor, and then you have a pipe that would go across the river channel, and you would run bubbles. And yes, these bubbles keep the fish from crossing the barrier. Now, there is Yahara River on Mendota Lake, and there's an estuary that they did lake balancing, biomanipulation, whatever you wish to call it, where they removed rough fish. And they certainly didn't want them to come from the river or the lake, and they put up these bubble barriers. Like I said, there's a variety of barriers to choose from. This has some real advantages because it doesn't interfere with navigation of boats. If they're going to, for example, canoe or kayak up the river, they can certainly go through this, where it's pretty much 97% proof that the fish will not cross it. And these bubble barriers are used for fish. They're used to get plastic debris out of the water, precipitate sediment. So they're used for other things as well. And I would propose that a project like this, there might be a certain time of the year in Lake Tainter where a number of your rough fish, like the red horse, might migrate into the river. And you can seal them off with something like this bubble barrier or another type of barrier. Like I say, I would recommend perhaps forming a committee where you're checking these things out. I'm ready for the next slide, Jim. Okay, when I mentioned plants before, we have done some work on Tainter Lake where we were doing a pilot study. And one of the things we did to one of the bays is we put up a turbidity curtain. And in the turbidity curtain, we planted some plants and we let the summer take over. And as you can see, inside the turbidity curtain where the plants are, because there are crustaceans, there aren't any fish, it's a lot cleaner than the rest of that area. This is in Lake Tainter, and it can really help. So plants can go a long way of taking up nutrients. They do have their own means, chemical means sometimes, of competing with cyanobacteria. Enough plants can inhibit cyanobacteria. So they're a way to balance out the lake. We do have a lot of nutrients, and increasing the plants are a way to deal with them. But we do want the plants in certain places. So these turbidity curtains can be put up in isolated areas and help increase the amount of plants that you have. So this was a project with me and the Friends of the Red Cedar. We did this. If I could see the next slide. Well, I'm talked about lake balancing quite a bit, and sometimes by itself, using chemicals like alum are a effective means of dealing with the green as well. Now, alum will attach directly to phosphate that is soluble in the water, and it will sink it or precipitate it to the bottom of the lake. Now, cyanobacteria, a lot of people don't know this, but in the outer covering of cyanobacteria, there is phosphate. There is a compound called lipopolysaccharide, and it has phosphates that stick out of the colonies of cyanobacteria. So something like alum will latch on to the cyanobacteria colonies, build up, and it will sink to the bottom as well. So you not only get rid of phosphate, but you will get rid of the cyanobacteria. It will clear up the water by adding a chemical like alum. There are other chemicals as well. There is Phoslock, I believe, is a product out there. There are many others like aluminum sulfate or potassium aluminum sulfate is what alum is, and it is a safe chemical to use. If you cook a lot, you might have in your spice cabinet, you might have something that's called alum, and this is the same thing. It is in a lot of, well, drinking water facilities that purify water often use alum, so we know that people are drinking after treatment with this chemical. So pretty safe. You can see the green water on the before alum, and then after the alum treatment, it can effectively handle it. And like I say, this has been used in combination with lake balancing. Both have been used. If you want an example, I would recommend looking at Grand Lake in St. Mary's, Ohio. Grand Lake is a 13,500 acre lake. It has extensive cyanobacteria. And what they have done is they did do a lake balancing where they removed rough fish, and they also treat with alum. They don't do the entire lake. I mean, if you think about it, 13,500 acres, that would be a terrible expense. But they did part of the lake. Bad areas of the lake, they add alum, precipitate out the cyanobacteria and nutrients, and clean things up. And then, of course, removing the rough fish helped the situation. And they seem pretty satisfied. There are, as I mentioned, the Yahara River estuary is another where the lake balancing has been in. Lake Wingra, that is attached to that chain of the Yahara River and Mendota. Wingra has been used and good results. I've seen articles where people were commenting and being pleased with how much cleaner Lake Wingra looks like. There's Silver Lake in Minnesota. There is a 98,000 acre lake in Utah that they are removing rough fish. So they're doing basically a lake balancing project in that large of a lake. A lot of people are interested in hearing, some thought it was mainly just small lakes. No, there are a variety of size lakes that this has been used in. But the alum by itself or in combination with lake balancing is an effective means. It really is. It's very good, probably the most popular and most widely used method to clean up the lake that there is. And then there is one other slide. And recently, I just started looking into this. There are a variety of dyes. Now, the claims that they make on these dyes that if they're in a lake, you can swim, you can fish, and it is perfectly safe. That it is the dye, that what does it do? Well, it blocks the sun. The photosynthetic organism needs sunlight. And by adding this dye, it blocks out the sun. And you can see the before is on the left, and they added the dye. Perhaps they didn't add it when it looked like this. They may have added it before it got this bad, but it maintained afterwards a fairly clean lake. So the dyes have some advantages, I guess, in the fact that it's blocking out the sun. They are probably the most expensive I've seen. Well, it ranges for maybe $150 to $300, and this can treat 1 acre. Well, again, don't do the entire lake. Just do the areas that are bad. And what you could do to see how it works in Lake Tainter, you could start off on a small experiment where you're spending a bit of money and seeing how long the dye lasts in that area, not expending excessive amounts of money. But it's a fairly cheap method if it works at dealing with the green. And I believe that this is my last slide. I will end here and open it up for questions.
Excellent presentation. Does anybody here on the board have questions for Scott?
I have, well, a lot of them, but I'll keep it to one here.
Okay.
So when you spoke of those other lakes where they're doing lake balancing projects or using a dye, are they, I don't know if this is the right term, but flowages like what Tainter is, where they're being fed by a river system and water's moving
Yes.
through it?
Yes.
They're not. Like just
For example, there's a lake in Sweden, Lake Finnerödjan. If I'm pronouncing it, mispronouncing it, I apologize. But this lake is 2,700 acres. And they tried a variety of things. None of them worked. They have 5 rivers feeding it, one river that exits that lake. And when they did the lake balancing or biomanipulation, whatever you wish, it was very effective. And it is a cheap method if you compare it to, you know, chemical and others. It is a cheap method to clean up the lake.
What's the name of the lake after?
With an F, Lake Finnerödjan in Sweden. Yeah,
like
I am
something.
probably having
Google will find
problems pronouncing it myself.
Rolls right off the
Google
tongue.
will
Yeah.
find it.
What was the name of the lake in Minnesota that you mentioned?
Silver Lake.
Silver.
Yeah. And then if you're wondering about Lake Grand in St. Mary's, Ohio, that was a fairly large lake as well, 13,000.
And you mentioned that they did a couple of different treatment
Yes.
things there.
Yes, people that I like in the scientific literature, and that would be Al Sharpley and Helen Jarve. They say that they are advocates for doing a variety of things, not, you know, putting all of your eggs in one basket, like not just agricultural mitigation, put in this lake balancing, perhaps a bit of chemicals or whatever that works, get the community involved, like what you're going to do with a lake district. Hire some of it done, but also learn to do it yourself. And it's improved a lot of bodies of water.
What's some of the rough fish harvesting stopped in 1986? Do you know why that is?
I think that there was a misunderstanding or a disagreement between the person that was harvesting the fish and the people that were paying to harvest. And it just stopped, and apparently they didn't care to do it. There is a part that I forgot, maybe, well, hate to go backwards on this, but there is a Act 180 Assembly Bill 377 that lists out the rough fish, and it is on the PowerPoint. And rough fish are the smaller ones, gizzard shad, moon eye, what we call sheep's head. There are a variety of suckers, such as the white sucker and red horse, that are rough fish. Of course, the common carp, and there's a variety of others that are listed out on that bill. And if you like, Jim, I could maybe send you that bill if you wanted to post it on your website or something for people to see, or the PowerPoint. If you want to go backwards, I may have forgotten. I think it's, well, let's go back one more. Apparently not. Forward then.
Okay.
Maybe after this one. No. Okay. I do
Yeah,
have.
the only
on
thing
one
I
of these
saw with the
slides.
list was that.
Yeah,
know.
yeah, there was, I did put up the assembly bill, I thought, on one of these slides. And it's interesting to most people what's considered a rough fish, because I guess the state did put these bills out to try to decide, okay, what are we going to consider a rough fish? And what it means, and it's important to note this, that there is no bag limit and there is no closed season on a rough fish. They will allow you to take it by line, by net, like a certain size seine net, as I understand, is completely legal. There are various nets that you can lift out of the water, smaller nets, maybe 7 feet in diameter, that they will allow for removing rough fish. They will allow bow and arrow. They will allow now crossbow.
Any
for-
idea how they were doing this back in the days?
This was seam net,
Was it?
and it may have been gill net as well, where I showed you the history.
Yeah,
Were they doing, why, were they doing this because the commercial fishermen would then go like have a market to sell the fish? Or were they
They
doing
did.
it to try to
They
clean?
did, and whether this is true or not, I guess there was some disagreement because being harvesting the fish and also being paid, I heard rumor that was the objection, you know, that you're harvesting these fish, maybe you should pay us.
I gotcha.
But whether that was true or not, I have no idea, you know, before my time. I didn't live here in
It would make,
1986.
it would make sense that if they were being paid to remove the fish and then selling the fish,
Right,
it's kind of
right.
double
And-
dipping.
Well, it is double dipping, but as I understand it, necessary to make it worthwhile for commercial fishermen to haul their equipment, risk their nets, et cetera. et
and
cetera.
and from what I had heard that they said, fine, you want to charge us? We'll go, there's plenty of other lakes that will gladly have us come
Oh.
and take the fish, you know, provide that service, so.
Okay. Then you
Interesting.
heard this as well. then.
Yeah,
Interesting.
I heard some similar thing. I mean,
All right.
and I know that there's a carp hunters that are out there right now. What are they using when they're,
Bow and arrow.
are they? So they're
Yeah,
going
but
out
they're
there-
not removing 110,000
No, right,
pounds.
exactly.
Yeah.
No, no.
So do you, maybe that's, and we could go on forever, so I don't want to drag this out, but do you know what would be like a good goal to try to remove if we were to do that? Like,
Oh, I would say if you removed 50,000 pounds, that's a great start. And that is the importance of having a population study where you know just exactly what you have in the lake. It is very important to know that. Maybe if you do a population study, maybe target the rough fish in particular on the study, so you know what you can remove. And then, of course, the first step would have to be get in that barrier. I see a bubble barrier. Yeah, you would have to add electricity all year long. You would have to have a place on a river, pick a place on the river, perhaps have a small containment for the compressor, perhaps a tank. There are things to look at like that, but the fact that it wouldn't interfere with navigation, you
so
could choose the place.
the bubble keeps the rough fish out, but not game fish out because it's just on the bottom?
It will keep all fish out. So what you want to do is go, if you know, like the Russian slough is where walleye will spawn. You would want to go beyond that. You don't want to stop the walleye from spawning. You want those fish.
Yeah,
Lots of times with a lake balancing, you are stocking a lake with predator fish. You are removing the rough fish. You are perhaps adding zooplankton or at least enhancing the habitat by increasing plants or putting in synthetic habitats that the zooplankton can hide, all of those things.
Dr. McGovern, I do have a question. Currently, we have 4 different ad hoc committees. 2 of them have to do with cleaning the lake. One is sedimentation and one is vegetation. They're
Okay.
focusing on those 2 areas, and we've only been doing this for a couple months, so we're in initial stages. Knowing that we're working on those 2 things currently, where would you suggest we start when it comes to projects on the lake?
I would start right here where you're looking at the green. It would certainly be where I would start. That first, and the other problems you have can certainly come later. Like, for example, the sedimentation problem that you have if you're talking about by Chapney boat landing where the red cedar comes in. You're going to have to deal with the Red Cedar River and probably the Hay River first, which are going to take years. The green is a public health concern, I'm going to call it. And I would say deal with that first. Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned way back, that, you have zooplankton that eat the cyanobacteria.
Yes,
But the problem is that zooplankton are eaten by, hatchlings,
correct.
which are primarily bottom fish.
The rough fish multiply very fast. I'm going to give an example of the common carp. You take a 10-pound common carp, you may have a 500,000 eggs from a common carp. Anywhere from 50% to 90% of those eggs will hatch. Think about the number of hatchlings there from several spawning female carp, how many there must be. Even if they only last for 2 weeks, they can completely deplete the zooplankton. And typically in Tainter Lake, in my opinion, that's exactly what happens. That typically you'll see some cyanobacteria colonies by the 3rd week of June, and you're getting those hatchling fish completely eliminating in some cases or greatly reducing the zooplankton. I do want to add something like a red horse as an adult. As an adult, even though the crustaceans are very, very small, they feed on them as adults. So we don't have a lot of means with, there isn't a lot of sport fishing for rough fish. They're just started to try to influence the people to go get them, so to speak, and remove them. We need more removal, but yes, those hatchlings, because the rough fish produce a lot of eggs, produce a lot of young.
Then it seems to me that when you're talking about a hatchling, say for a common carp,
Yeah,
there's only a short period of time during which those things are eating the zooplankton. You should be able to identify a time during the year where you could seed the lake then with homegrown zooplankton, if you.
yes, of course, you could if
Except that
you
the red
wished.
horse are still eating them,
Pardon me?
except that the red horse adults are still eating them.
Correct. But if you had the project where you were removing the fish and then also stocking with zooplankton, you would have a pretty good program there.
Now, when during the year then would be wise to stock the zooplankton?
Stocking the zooplankton would be most useful in early spring.
Early spring,
Yeah.
isn't that when you have the hatchlings?
Well, you would have the hatchlings then, but you're fighting against the hatchlings, reducing the zooplankton to the point where the green really takes off. And if you can lengthen that time, lengthen the time that the zooplankton are going to be there and feeding, you can sometimes extend and keep the lake clearer, and sometimes the plants come in and also help the situation as well.
They're commercial sources of zooplankton.
I don't know if they can sell, they're intended for people who are going to raise them themselves or show them in a laboratory. What I would recommend that you would maybe have to get a container, get a small amount of them first, raise them, they multiply very quickly. Then before too long, you would have a large amount of them, say you used a 55-gallon drum or something like that. You would have a large amount of them in short order and would be able to release them. What you might decide, maybe the plants aren't growing at that time, you could put in an artificial habitat that would be a refuge for the zooplankton and keep them up and perhaps find something where you can reduce the amount of hatchlings as well. Maybe open up incentives for people to capture them as bait.
Anyone else have any more questions for Dr. McGovern? I will just toss it out. We only have three people here. If any of you three have anything you guys would like to ask. Sorry.
Thank you for your time and effort, though. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you. Really appreciate the presentation.
Have a good
Is it
evening.
all right? Would we be able to share this on the
Yes.
website? Okay,
Yes.
that'd be awesome.
Thank you, Dr. McGovern.
Thank you.
Can I make a motion for a 2-minute break?
Yes, you may. We'll break for 2 minutes and resume. Pretty creepy. I think they have a real narrow spawning. And it was it near like sandbar?
Oh, yeah. They always go for this. That's why those guys are always taking those carp shooting boats up in the sandbar.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. All right. So we'll rejoin the meeting. Let me call up agenda. All right, we're gonna move on to Commissioner Communication and Committee Reports, Treasurer's Report. Do we have a Treasurer's Report, Grant?
Yep, pretty simple one. This month, we had one expense for $468, and that was to Survey Monkey for the survey that we're gonna talk about later that's going out to everyone in the Lake District. So our balance currently is $2,940.37. And this upcoming month between now and our next meeting, I'll be a little bit more active because I did get our first check from Tainter Township. And I believe Tom said the one from Red Cedar Township's on the way. And we have a insurance bill to pay. So there'll be more movement next month, but I'll update you on all that then.
Excellent.
May I, before you move on, Jim?
Yes.
Can I get that balance again slowly for
Okay,
those of us that aren't too sharp?
gotcha. 2,940.37.
Perfect. Thank you.
You bet.
Kind of along those lines, I know I have a key for the PO box, and Tom, I gave you one as well, right?
Grant.
Grant has it?
I'm gonna give it back.
Oh, because I don't know if either of you then have been checking the box that often.
I have not.
Okay. Because I picked it up, I think last week, and it was like full of Dunn County reminders, mostly. There were 2 insurance
Okay,
pieces of paperwork that I left on my kitchen table, so.
that's why the key's going back to Tom. I don't go to Colfax that often.
And I tend to, the difference between a box of Menominee and Colfax was like $20 or 25 for the year, so that's why we opted for Colfax, so.
I can stop there.
Plus, the lobby in Colfax is open 24 hours a day,
Oh,
and Menominee's closes at 5:15.
oh, that
So,
Colfax sounds better than I
yes,
just.
that, because you can show up at 2 a.m. and walk in there and get your mail, so. Let's see. Oh, a motion to accept the treasurer's report.
I'll make a motion to accept it.
We have a second?
I'll second.
Chuck seconds. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And passes. Moving on to item G on the agenda, discussion and action, final review of the Tainter Lake resident survey and survey distribution. Who would like to discuss that? Because I was not part of that particular committee or group.
Pete, you wanna take it? You probably had more input than I did.
Yeah, I don't know if everybody should have gotten an email message from Al Brown.
Mhm.
With that, two attachments on the bottom. One is a survey which he intends to send out on or use Survey Monkey to process this thing. I know nothing about monkeys. So, but Al and I and Chuck worked through several different versions of this. I think the one he's got here is pretty good now. And we'll see what happens. And he's ready to send it out. But I think he needs a motion today in order to approve the expenditures. The other thing is, this is kind of interesting. If you look in that same email message, he has a postcard. Which it would be sent out to every I don't know, either resident or landowner in the Lake District. I'm not sure exactly how it's gonna work.
I think it's going to the. Well, I'm not sure. It's 750 people or 750 copies.
Yeah,
There's 630 properties and 900 residents, so I'm guessing it's going to mainly the residents.
probably. And I'm not really sure. Well, yeah, that could they could get an address list of home addresses. And if the home address is in Minnesota, so be it. And that's a good place to send it.
And
Anyway,
I'm sorry. That was part of the holdup. Number one, L&M Mail Service does not distribute via postcard or does not print on
Right.
postcard. They will distribute on a postcard. So we had to add an extra step to have it printed someplace else. The second issue was that at this time, he has not been able to get a complete mailing list for not for the address here on the lake. That's not the one we want. The one we want is where people receive their mail. And so far, the county has not, and he have not been able to get together on that. So they will work that out very shortly. And I would assume that this could be ready to go in a week or just longer than that.
well, on this postcard, it's just a notification that the survey's going on and tells how that you can access the survey in order to complete it, either on the website, Facebook, on the internet, or on the postcard itself is a QR code that they can scan and kind of curious about how that works, but I'll get my postcard and try it and see what goes on. But we got a lot of different ways of them being able to access the survey, and then the monkey, I guess, will sort it all out.
There you go.
Okay, that's a good segue into the next item, which is actually an action item on approval of the mailing and printing costs. Do we know what those are yet?
Yeah, I think it's mail from L&M's 130, postage rate is 400, printing is 138. Excuse me, mailing and postage totals 400, printing of the postcards 138, so the total is 538, and I think Al had that in the budget for like 700, Pete, if I remember, so it's a little bit under the budget if I remember correctly.
Okay. Would somebody like to make a motion to approve those those costs so that we can get that done.
I'll make a motion to approve the $538 for printing and mailing of the survey.
I'll second.
Any further discussion?
Pete, did you have something?
I was concerned about, well, he does mention in here that there's $700 for postage and $500 for printing in the project budget. So
Way under.
we're well under that. That's, there's $1,200 available for doing this. And so I don't think we've got any problem with this at all.
Excellent. So there's been a motion and a second, and we've had discussion. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
I,
And that passes. Let's see, moving on. I don't see, kind of skipped over committee reports. So let's kind of go back to that. Let me go back to we'll start with the sedimentation committee. Grant, is that yours? Did you
Yeah.
guys meet?
Yeah, Tom and I had a meeting on Monday with our other people who are on the committee with us, except for one person. Eric was the only one missing.
Yep.
Yeah, we just kind of talked about what the goals for the sedimentation committee would be, and just what I would call like order of operations type stuff, like what should we, if we're gonna try to, in the end, one of our goals that we stated was to restore boat access to people who have lost it. And another one of our goals was to reduce the volume of sand that enters into Tainter every year from the red cedar specifically. And we know that the hay is also an issue, but we just want to try to tackle that red cedar area first. So what are the steps that we need to, go in? What's the proper order of operations to reach those goals? And so we had some interesting discussion, and I guess, Tom, if you want to add any more, you sure can.
I think you did a good job.
I realized when I got the agenda for your next meeting that it said today at 5 o'clock.
Oh,
So I don't know when it actually is.
It took place Monday, but my assistant made a mistake on that.
Okay,
Siri.
so if anybody was looking at the website, it had today for the date, so. How about the vegetation removal committee? Have you guys met?
Yeah, we had our first meeting December 5th, and then again on this Tuesday at Tainter Town Hall. 3 of the 4 committee members were there, and we are currently waiting on hearing from Alex Smith on the DNR. If they can do a plant-weed-aquatic vegetation survey this summer. That's the whole key to the program. We have to get that done first before we can do anything. And I recontacted him email yesterday, have not heard back from him. He's really good about getting back. So I'm assuming we'll hear something from him. Also had several questions for him on doing a possible experimental mechanical harvesting in 2025, once we get the plant survey, when we know where the weeds are. And so that we're kind of waiting on too. So we do not have another meeting scheduled until we hear back from Alex Smith. One other note, and I think Jim, you asked about it, but our surface water planning grant that Al, Pete and I worked on and turned in on November 15th. We have not heard back yet from the state or the DNR. I think Al's on top of that, but they set up a rating system for our grant, and we have not heard back from them on our score yet. Pete, anything else on that?
I don't know anything about it either.
Okay. So.
Okay, other than that, the ad hoc committee on, buoys and no wake met on, January, 10th, at the Pioneer. Among the things that we had an objective, to determine whether, as a subcommittee, whether we felt it was important for the Lake District to, either take over the existing no wake buoy ordinance from the town of Tainter or create our own. Or the other objective would be to just leave it alone. As a committee, we decided that that would be best if we had that responsibility because it fits into really kind of one of the objectives of the Lake District, which is making the lake better, but also, safety and health aspect of it. So that was kind of where we determined. So we're kind of moving forward where we'll go with and ultimately a recommendation to this committee from there. Also, we had a discussion about the boat landings and whether the committee should take that also under its wing at the same time that we're also talking about this other stuff. And that was also decided that that should fall under the committee. So we had people agree with this. We had a very lively discussion about whether there should be lunch fees and all of that stuff. And so that's gonna kind of continue as we move forward. And we're either, as opposed to meeting at the town hall, Pioneer's been accessible. We're actually going to see whether we can do our next meeting next month at either Elk Point or potentially Jake's, just to kind of move it around. We kind of would like to do it at Elk Point because we think that if we do have a discussion about boat landings, that they should definitely be a part of it. And that might be a real good way to have them participate if we hold it there. The only thing we'll have to figure out is make sure that they don't have something going on, like at Pioneer on Wednesdays at 7 o'clock, I think they have pool, and so it got really loud by the tail end of our meeting. So that's gonna be our consideration for our next meeting. So moving on, next on the item, our agenda was the identification of any additional potential speakers for upcoming meetings. I don't know if anybody had anybody that they were working on or thinking about. Pete?
Yes, I have a tentative agreement from a gentleman by the name of Dan Early from the Cedar Lake Protective and Rehabilitation District. And it's located in both Polk and St. Croix counties. They have had similar problems similar to those we experienced in Lake Tainter. And I think Dan is the alum expert there. And
So they've done alum.
they have done alum, but they've also done a lot of ag work upstream. And so I think he's going to be kind of interesting in showing the relative importance of either process. I think we're a little bit different. I think we have much more flow here than they do. They've got a small kind of a creek coming in the north and a small one going out the south. And so it's a little bit different than our experience, but I think he'll bring some good information to us.
Did he have any particular like a time he wanted to speak, or is just open to any time?
He'll be here on our next meeting
Oh, okay.
in February. At least that was the best between February and March. That was the best time for him, and he's getting back to me whether it's firm or not now.
Was he
of,
going to be here in person or?
in person.
Okay. Excellent. Anybody else have any potential speakers or people that they've been talking to or working with?
The thing that came to mind listening to Dr. McGovern was, he was talking a lot about that fish study. Now, was the DNR going to do that, or did they just recently do one?
They didn't study rough fish, right?
Yeah, I think it was done in 2022 and there was no focus on rough fish.
Okay,
So when it comes to that, we will probably do it I shouldn't say we will probably. I should say it's an option for us to do it on our own. And there's a new method for doing a population study of fish, and it's based on DNA. And rather than the old mark and recapture process, that we got a bid for last summer, I think was $84,000 and change. I talked to Dr. McGovern about this, and he figures that the DNR test can be done for $10,000 to $15,000. And he said the only thing what we will have to do is kind of learn how to do it, which won't be that difficult, but then we'll have to find a lab, because not all labs will test this.
You said DNR, did you mean DNA?
Did I say DNR?
Yes.
It's DNA.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry.
yeah, that would be the only kind of, the idea of having a speaker that could, maybe it would be a commercial fishing operation. How do you do it? What does it cost, but we start with next month with what Pete has lined up and think about those other speakers later.
I don't know, Tom, what do you think about our commercial fishermen that we had?
We'll pass on them.
Okay,
I talked to a commercial fisherman, and I snapped a picture of the door on their truck, so I would always have their information. And I think their business is called Carp Hunters or something like that. They're out of Minnesota. And it sounds like they're busy. They have lots of work, so.
Yeah, I've seen their
That's always an option.
website and they look like they know what they're doing, but it doesn't look cheap. But what
nothing-
is?
Yeah,
Yeah.
nothing's gonna be cheap.
well, the other thing is, we got a difficult lake. Because it's, there are a lot of snags and
Yep.
stumps and stuff down there that were never taken out when they put the dam in.
Right.
And those things that tear nets up in a hurry. So,
And as Dr. McGovern mentioned, we can do some of that ourselves. If people are willing to
sure.
get dirty and get wet. So,
Well, I think if it's something that can be, doesn't even have to be shown, if it has a possibility of helping. There's a lot of people roll up their sleeves and get dirty and wet to
Yep.
do stuff, so. All right, well, we got, at least next month is taken care of as far as a speaker, but if you've got other ones that you think of in the meantime. Our next meeting of the Board of Commissioners here will be Thursday, February 15th in this room at the Dunn County Government Center. On our agenda tonight, I don't know if there's anybody that has any agenda items that they can think of this evening. If not, it's something obviously as the agenda gets put together, you can suggest something and have it added to the agenda. Are there any announcements before we adjourn?
Now, I have an announcement.
All right.
We're celebrating tonight about our first anniversary of existence as a Lake District.
Oh, wow.
right,
I think that ought to go in the minutes.
There we go.
One more thing to type, Tom.
yeah, let's see, what do I put that in?
Happy
Yeah.
birthday, Lake District.
Happy birthday, Lake District.
I can still remember being there and listening to the votes, and Leanne and I were tabulating it, and it was pretty nerve wracking. So, good point, Pete.
Well, and I think that, I'll just say that I think that a lot of people that were at that meeting that voiced a lot of concern and issues, and I was even one of them. I was one of the skeptics. That I think that, the district has proven a lot of people, the people that were, I had a lot of gloom and doom and were afraid of a lot of things, and they've shown that this has been a pretty good, a body of people that have pretty much have, done some good work. So congratulations, everybody.
Thank you.
So, if there are no other announcements, then this meeting is adjourned.
Usually we get a motion for that,
Oh.
Jim.
I motion to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you.
And is there a second? Tom? why don't you second it?
I'll second that.
There's no other discussion. All those in favor of adjourning the meeting signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And now it's adjourned.
There you
Al
go.
Al says it's not necessary to have a motion for adjournment.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, well, then,
Thank you.
County board meetings there are no motions ever to adjourn. It just,
perfect. I'll just
I
take
would
that
do
right
that.
off there.
I should have been, but I wasn't.
Thanks for coming,
So you
Bob.
did good.
Appreciate it.
I just read what Al put into the email.